A new school year, a major curriculum refresh just announced. But a report over the summer revived some perennial questions about the fairness of school funding in the province. Joining us now to consider how well Ontario allocates the $24 billion we spent educating roughly 2 million elementary and secondary students, we welcome Hugh McKenzie, author of the report called Short-Changing Ontario Students, an overview and assessment of education funding in Ontario, and Annie Kidder, Executive Director of People for Education, and we're delighted to welcome you two back into our studio here for this, the first week of our 12th season here on TVO. Hugh, we are going to talk about your report on education funding and whether you think it has been fair or not, but first, with the developments over the last 24 to 48 hours, I think we've got to shine a bit of a spotlight on the math situation in the province. The EQAO, the Quality Assessment Office, has shown that math test scores are declining rather precipitously. I know the government says that it is planning a potential curriculum refresh as a result of this and may look at the job the EQAO does as well. But all of that aside, let's figure out, and Annie, let's go to you first on this. How concerned are you about the fact that the math test scores have dropped so significantly?
Well, I think we definitely have to take it seriously. We have to remember a couple of things. Context is always important here, so that when we talk about the scores getting worse, what gets measured in Ontario is the percent of students reaching the standard. So this is the percent of students getting a B. So we're not saying all the rest of the kids are failing. It's just that many, about half of the kids are getting B. Most of them are passing math, but they're definitely doing worse. So we do have to pay attention to that. And we have to think about what it means and why. And the worry is we react to things and we go, oh, this is a disaster. John Manley famously said a few years ago it was a national emergency, the drop in math scores. I don't think this is a national or a provincial emergency.
You would like to see the numbers going in the right direction.
Absolutely, the numbers should be going up, but I think what we have to make sure that we do is look at why. We are actually teaching math in the same way. The curriculum's the same. A lot of things have stayed the same, but the scores are changing. One of the things the EQAO reported on is about, they survey all the students in Ontario when they do these tests, kids' attitudes towards math. That may be a thing that's worrying. So I think that we have to look at a lot of the other kind of skills, foundational competencies that you need in order to succeed at math, but we can't ignore this.
Okay, but was it last year or the year before? I can't remember now, where the Ontario government came out and said, you know, we're going to spend $60 million to kind of improve the way that we help our teachers teach math, and we're going to see the results of that in higher test scores and kids who don't hate math as much as they used to and all that stuff. And it seems like, well, first of all, tell us, what did that $60 million go towards?
Well, in some cases, it did go to more support for teachers. It also, part of that policy was, we'll teach math for longer. It's not necessarily doing the same thing for longer isn't necessarily the solution. And it may have been a little bit simplistic, the reaction. The scores are going down, we're going to be seen to be doing something. I think we still need to do more work understanding exactly why. We need to look at streaming in grade 9 because the kids who are in the applied stream are doing very badly in math. And we need to understand what the attitudinal stuff is, because it seems as if, rather than going back to, I always horribly use my child as an example, that she loves this. I have a child who's done advanced statistics but doesn't know her times table. So it's not necessarily true that the problem is only, what's called automaticity, that kids need more drilling in math. But there definitely is. It may be us, it may be society, it may be parents, it may be, she was an economist, maybe all the rest of us going around saying math is hard and boring. And maybe we need to go back to more an attitude about what's joyful, what's interesting, what's exciting in math than we are right now.
Well, let me ask an economist, is math hard and boring? You've never thought so.
Well, no, I actually started out life as a mathematician and became an economist later. So I don't have math phobia, but I think Annie's point about the context is I think really important, and part of that context is political leaders running around saying that science is junk and doesn't matter, and climate change doesn't make any sense, and don't believe anything that those guys that have PhDs in science are telling you. It's all bunk.
We don't have a lot of that in this country. I mean, I know we get CNN here,
we're exposed to an awful lot of media.
Yes.
Frankly, sadly, I spend more time reading about Donald Trump these days than I do about any Canadian politician, and I really can't avoid it. But I think that education in part reflects what society feels like it values. And I think in addition to worrying about those mechanics, about the craft of teaching math, I think the context is really important. And to the extent that we fail to push back against those public attitudes that dismiss factually based, scientifically based reasoning and thinking, to the extent that we don't push back at those things, we encourage people to think that they don't matter.
And if I could just add one more thing, I think that the danger is also in a kind of simplistic reaction again, so that one of the things we need to be doing more is connecting math to everything else. So understanding, creativity, all the broader kind of competencies, and that math is part of that. So that if we put all our eggs in, if we swing back to going, now let's just focus on math, we miss the interconnection in learning. So that I think that one of the things that we do know about kids and about learning is that it's better to have a kind of integrated approach to understand how math is interwoven into so many other things, and how those creative skills, the social emotional skills that allow you to keep on working when stuff's hard, that all that has to be seen all of a piece. And right now we tend to just react in sort of singular ways.
Okay, fair enough, but you can't have been surprised by the reaction in some quarters to the notion that math scores are going down because we've stopped doing rote mathematics, and we've stopped teaching kids or telling kids that they actually have to know their 12 times tables, and that all this, I'm exaggerating for effect here, but all this airy-fairy way of teaching math, touchy-feely stuff, isn't getting the job done. Can you weigh in on where you are on that continuum?
I think that again, it goes, let's look at evidence, as opposed to my sort of instinctive reaction to, well, then let's drill them more. When I was young, you had to stand up and, you had to, learn the times tables in that way.
And we know them.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have a little bit of a hard time with some of them. But on the other hand, conceptually, I'm really good at math, and I love math, and it's an incredibly important part of my work. So that's where we have to look at evidence, understand that evidence is a real thing. There aren't alternative facts, there's actually evidence, and understand the evidence about kids learning. And there is no evidence that we should be swinging back all the other way. There is lots of evidence that we need both, though, and that we need teachers who are, comfortable teaching math in all grades, because if you're an elementary teacher, you have to be able to teach everything, but that we also need to think about how students learn and what are some better ways for students learning. So again, the danger is a kind of simple reaction to this. The important thing is really looking at the evidence and the context.
Okay. With an economist here, we're going to talk some money now, because you did, over the summer, you released a report that you wrote. You being an economist, it was for the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. It was about school funding. And, I always like to do this the first week or two back, because I don't assume, actually, I do assume that a lot of people take time out from reading the papers and watching the news over the summer, so they may have missed this, and I want you to get us up to scratch on this, Hugh. In which case, the big takeaway from your report on school funding is what?
I guess for me, the big takeaway is that we have a huge accountability gap in the way that education is funded in Ontario, that we have a centrally controlled funding apparatus that determines how much we spend, an elaborate accountability mechanism between the provincial government and school boards, and witness the conversation we're just having, accountability to students with respect to students related to scores, no accountability whatsoever with respect to the overall level of funding. And I think that's the big gap. The evidence that you can get looking at the data, looking at the numbers, tells you that we're not spending enough money on special education, and we're spending it in very strange ways now. We're not spending enough money on equalizing opportunity for students in the classroom. There isn't nearly enough money going in, and nearly enough resources going into helping students deal with disadvantages they bring to the school system as a result of their family's demographic characteristics. And we're doing a terrible job. We're not doing nearly an adequate job at addressing the issues that relate to English as a second language. And none of those issues is an issue that I've invented. The funding for students at risk, for example, was flagged as an issue of concern by the initial expert panel looked at it back in 1997. asking for a more complete review and a more thoughtful review of what's required.
Did that happen?
That never happened. Brzezinski, who was appointed to study the system by Ernie Eves in the dying days of the Conservative government in 2002, he recommended a sort of root and branch analysis.
And we're going back 15 years now for this one that you're referring to now.
And when Dalton McGuinty was running for re-election the first time, he promised a review. That didn't happen. So we really haven't. We've had warning signs given to us repeatedly about the adequacy of that funding, and we've done nothing about it. We've had English as a second language. Brzezinski identified that as an issue. There have been 2 reports from the provincial auditor focusing on the inadequacy of ESL funding. And special education is interesting because one of the few things that the original funding formula design did right, I think, is that it shifted the focus of special education funding from what, if it was a workers' compensation system, you'd call the meat chart, where there's a certain amount of funding depending on what disability you come with, to something that was based on need. So it was the funding formula was driven by what are the needs that are identified in the individual placement review committee process, and what resources are needed to address those needs. And that's the way the system ran for the first 6-7 years of its existence. And then the provincial government panicked at this open-ended commitment, and the cost started to go up. So then they just capped it. And so for 10 years, the funding that school boards got was based on the special needs that they had identified in 2003. And then in the most recent iteration of the funding formula for special education, they now completely separated the funding from the identified needs. So it's all now done on the basis of head counts and statistical models that have absolutely nothing to do with the needs that are identified in the process and mandated by law.
Okay, let's pick all this apart a bit. And the first thing I want you to address, if you would, Annie, is people heard off the top me say that we spend in this province annually $24 billion to educate 2 million elementary and secondary students. That sounds like enough money. I mean, it sounds like we're spending an awful lot of money right now. Do you want to disabuse me of that notion?
No. It is an awful lot of money, but it's an incredibly good investment. So we have to remember that part first. That if this were the stock market, we'd all be putting our money in it. That you get 10 times back for the money you invest in education. So we have to remember that this is not a business where we're going to hit a bottom line. That investing money in kids saves us money on taxes, on healthcare, on everything, on the criminal justice system. First thing. And yes, it's really, 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 really expensive. And I think to Hugh's point, and we're spending more than ever in Ontario. I don't think we're spending less in Ontario, but Hugh's point about accountability is a really important one. And the auditor has written about a lot of parts of the education system and wondered at how are we ensuring that the money is being spent in the right way? How are we understanding where the money's being spent? Special ed is a really good example. They changed all the way it's funding. They're not evaluating whether it's working better now or not. We also looked a lot at what's called the Learning Opportunities Grant, which initially was there to provide extra resources, supports, programs for kids that we knew were going to struggle coming into school, as Hugh said, because of their demographics. But that demographic portion of the grant, so the money that boards got based on who's in your board, the income of parents' education, their immigration status, that was 82% of the grant when it was first put in place in 1998. Now it's 47% of the grant.
They have cut back on that
grant.
Well,
they haven't. They've changed the grant around, and now it's this big kind of sort of pot of things for math. It's got math in it, that's good, but it's got libraries in it, it's got outdoor ed in it, and it's lost its original purpose, and it never got looked at very carefully. So it may not be necessarily the case that there's not enough money, but understanding where the money's having the best effect, how are we spending it, how did the choices get made? There's so much politics in education, so often we make choices based on what seems as if it's going to be politically popular or that the general public can understand. Class size is a good example of this. A lot of money was put into lowering class sizes. That is good in some cases, but it's very, very, very expensive. And did we weigh all the other places like the Learning Opportunity Grant or special ed in terms of, or even buildings, which is a very unsexy place to spend money?
Every expert I've spoken to says that if you had $1 billion burning a hole in your pocket, you wouldn't spend it to make classes smaller.
Yeah, I think every expert does say that.
And yet
it's hard to,
we do it anyway.
But because it's easy to
politically
understand.
irresistible.
Yeah.
If we wanted to change the way, as a result of your report, the way we fund education in the province now, so that we didn't have as many problems with ESL and we didn't have as many problems with other things that you've identified here, what would you do?
Well, the first thing I would do is establish a mechanism for accountability. I would just a couple of little cases in point that I think are really interesting. One is that we spend there's an enormous amount of money that's allocated towards school operations and maintenance. It's clearly not enough, because the evidence is that the schools are deteriorating. When Rosansky reported in 2002, he identified a $5.8 billion deferred maintenance backlog. The ministry's own website now says it's $15 billion.
$15 billion?
$15 billion
backlog in maintenance not done on schools.
Yes, exactly. So basically, school boards have been spending capital in order to keep the operations going, and the system is deteriorating. Maybe a surprising fact: there's no standards for school maintenance. If you ask any building owner, they will say this building is maintained to BOMA standard X. This other building doesn't have to be maintained to that standard. It can be maintained to some other standard. There's no standard. So there's no specific expectation that says.
So how do you know if it's
happening? How do you know if it's happening? And how do you know if you're giving the school boards enough money if you don't have a standard that they're expected to meet with the money? Another case in point: school transportation. Hundreds of thousands of kids spend an enormous amount of time on the bus. You'd think that in the funding system for school transportation, the ministry would have a standard that says that a 6-year-old can't be expected to spend more than 40 minutes a day on a bus, and a 10-year-old can't be expected to spend more than an hour on a bus.
Do we have those standards?
We don't have standards like that, and so we have little kids spending an enormous amount, getting on a bus at 7 o'clock in the morning and not getting to school until 8:45. Again, it just seems to me that part of fixing the system is getting some accountability. Little case in point that elementary teachers I find get really excited about. One of the things that is really interesting about the way we fund English as a second language there's no recognition for density. So the additional funding that is generated for English as a second language is the same whether you've got a class of 20 kids, 15 of whom are ASL students, or whether you've got a class of 20 students with one. The funding per student is the same. Clearly, that doesn't make any sense.
Sounds like there's a lot of stuff to fix here.
Right.
Okay. Private fundraising for public schools. Just to give you a sense of this, obviously, school councils and parents and so on, they do all sorts of fundraising to help with the gaps that they believe the allocations don't cover. And the top Toronto District School Board fundraisers last year, apparently, well, we're not going to identify them, but the top school raised an additional $260,000. Second, $148,000. Third, $131,000. That compares to approximately 250 schools whose school councils raised nothing. And I do want to start with this, please, Andy. Tell us whether or not this raises issues of equitable access to good education for all.
It absolutely does. It's part of how our organization started, was over a concern about fundraising, and we've been watching it grow over the years, and we ask schools every year how much fundraising they do, and it ranges between $0 to $200,000 some years $300,000 in a year. And the sort of creation of kind of have and have not schools is really worrying. And I think that for us, in a way, you could think of it this way, that it provides a kind of double advantage. You know, for a kid like my kids, say, not that I'm so rich, but they live in homes where we can afford, you know, extra classes or, you know, piano lessons, sports teams. Then they go to schools where there's lots of fundraising, which also has those extras. So my kids get a double advantage. They got it at home and at school. Other kids have a double disadvantage. They come from homes where parents are struggling to put food on the table and they can't do the fundraising, and they go to school where then and we have tracked this, you know, where they're less likely to have access to arts programs. They're less likely to have good athletic programs. There are a lot of fees in there too that provide a barrier to students. We have been saying, and we continue to say, that the guidelines for fundraising are filled with very big loopholes which allow fundraising for pretty major resources in school. There's nothing, fundraising in and of itself isn't, you know, evil. There's nothing wrong with it. It's actually a really great way to be involved, but allowing this kind of augmentation of the system is really problematic. It's the fundamental thing about public education, providing everybody with an equitable chance.
So then I want to know, Hugh, what you intend to do about it, because I don't think you can go out and say it's illegal for parents to fundraise and have bake sales to raise money for a new jungle gym for the whatever, or, you know, better stuff for science class. You probably can't do that, so what's the alternative?
Well, you have to fix the system. You have to fix the system. You have to make it more accountable. There's I think, of all of the numbers related to this issue, the one that's most telling to me is that the demographic portion of the Learning Opportunities Grant across the province is worth about $180 per student. Average fundraising is $280 per student. So what that means is that we are spending $100 a kid more on what I would call upside down equity than we're spending on equity. And I think that
But is the solution here to have the Ministry of Education offering more money to the schools that can't raise it on their own?
that's that's part of the solution, yes, because I think that many of the things that school-based fundraising are investing in are things that the school system should be doing as a matter of course. And I think that
Computers in the classroom, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And if that means that that schools in poor areas where the family's not likely to have the kid's not likely to have a computer at home, get more computers in the classroom, then that's what that kind of money should be spent on.
I'm down to the last minute,
Yeah,
Danny.
I think we have to make sure that what we've established is what should be there in every school, and ensure that kind of universality. Because if we start playing one thing off the other, we're going to end up in trouble. We're not going to have a universal public education system, which we should. But what the province does need to do is commit to this is what should be there in every single school, and then make the fundraising policy align with that. Because you can say, it right now says you can't fundraise, for instance, which you can in BC, to build a whole new wing on your school. You're not allowed to do that in Ontario. Good. So there are rules. We have to make the rules clearer, but we also have to back it up with making sure that the funding is there in all schools to ensure that you're not raising money for extra stuff for science class, because that is a very core, important thing to all students.
3 big issues, and still so many more to cover. Actually, the Ombudsman's coming in right after this.
Great.
So we'll talk school busing with him, because your point about kids staying on a bus for an hour and a half when the bus remembers to pick them up. That's another thing, too. Really good to have the two of you in here today. Hugh McKenzie from McKenzie & Associates did the Shortchanging Ontario Student Study for ETFO. Annie Kidder, Executive Director, People for Education. Thanks so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.